The Director of Public Health and the Gulf Health Council, Dr. Ahmed Ammar, stated that the Gulf countries may not witness a second wave of the spread of COVID-19. He said that the second wave of spread is taking place in countries whose precautionary measures have been completely lifted and without any progressive relief. Dr. Al-Ammar added that the Gulf countries, including the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, did not fully lift their precautionary measures, and when the measures were relaxed, this was progressive with continuous monitoring and risk assessment. France, Germany and 4 other EU countries on Wednesday urged the European Union to take a greater role in preparing for any future pandemic, conceding that COVID-19 responses has fallen short. There should be a common European approach to such challenges in future, wrote France President Emmanuel Macron and Germany's Chancellor Angela Merkel, along with the leaders of Spain, Poland, Belgium and Denmark. They addressed their letter and policy paper to European Commission Chief Ursula von der Leyen in the strongest attempt yet by the bloc's most powerful leaders to spur the EU executive to fix the disunity displayed during the crisis, especially in its earliest days. The government said on Wednesday the number of suspected and confirmed deaths from the coronavirus in Britain has passed the grim milestone of 50,000. Business Secretary Alok Sharma cited analysis from the Office for National Statistics, which said 50,107 people had died in the outbreak. The National Office assessed all deaths where COVID-19 was monitored or suspected on the death certificate up to May 29th. Officially, the government only counts the deaths of those who had tested positive for COVID-19. That figure rose to 40,883 on Tuesday, up 286 on Monday. Peru emerged as a global COVID-19 hotspot on Wednesday as the Health Ministry registered more than 200,000 cases, ranking the South American country as the 8th highest in the world by number of infections. The death toll rose to 5,738 and the total number of infections climbed to 203,736, an increase of more than 4,000 cases from the previous day. The ministry said 167 people had died from COVID-19 in the past 24 hours. The figures show Peru as second only to Brazil as Latin America's worst affected country by number of overall cases and third after Brazil and Mexico in terms of deaths. The Garda said on Wednesday members of the Washington, D.C. National Guard have tested positive for coronavirus in the wake of their deployment during recent protests in the U.S. Capitol. D.C. National Guard spokesperson Lieutenant Colonel Brooke Davis said they could not reveal the number of positive tests due to operational security. She said they came after the 1,700 members were demobilized following service during the protests that erupted in front of the White House and elsewhere over the killing of George Floyd by a Minneapolis police officer. The Guard were mobilized by the mayor and then the federal government on June 1st to help keep order after protests turned into rioting and looting. New York lawmakers voted on Wednesday to repeal a decades-old law that shields police officers' disciplinary records from the public. New York Governor Andrew Cuomo tweeted that he will sign the bill into law this week amid nationwide protests against police brutality. The bill is part of a package of police reform measures advanced by the Democratic-controlled Assembly and Senate in Albany this week as protests gripped the nation following the death of George Floyd. New York police unions have called the legislation an attack on police. The U.S. Senate confirmed General Charles Brown as Air Force Chief of Staff, the first African American to ever lead one of the Pentagon's 6 armed services. Brown, currently commander of the Pacific Air Forces, will become only the second African American to ever serve on the powerful Joint Chiefs of Staff, after former Joint Chiefs Chair Colin Powell during the 1989 and 1993. His confirmation in a unanimous 98-0 vote in the Senate comes as protests continue around the country over racism and mistreatment of blacks by police. Russia and China have started making the case at the United Nations against Washington's claim that it can trigger a return of all sanctions on the Islamic Republic of Iran at the Security Council, with Moscow invoking a 50-year-old international legal opinion to argue against the move. Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov and the Chinese government top diplomat Wang Yi both wrote to the 15-member Council and UN Chief Antonio Guterres as the United States threatens to spark a so-called sanctions snapback under the Iran nuclear deal, even though Washington quit the accord in 2018. Minister Lavrov wrote in the May 27 letter made public this week that the United States was being ridiculous and irresponsible. A presidential ruling in the official Gazette showed on Wednesday Turkish President Tayyip Erdogan appointed new governors in 41 provinces. The statement said as part of the move, 23 governors were shuffled between provinces and 18 were newly appointed. 17 former governors were appointed as chief civil inspectors, and one was appointed as a top advisor to President Erdogan. Turkey has 81 provinces. Hundreds of people marched in Hong Kong's streets on Tuesday night to mark a year since the start of anti-government protests, as the leader of the semi-autonomous Chinese city called for peace and stability. Everyone has to learn their lesson, including the Hong Kong government, Carrie Lam told reporters. Hong Kong cannot bear that kind of chaos, and the people of Hong Kong want a stable and peaceful environment to be able to live and work here happily. Lam did not elaborate on what lessons should be learned. Protesters rallied in a square in Hong Kong's Central District before marching on nearby streets, shouting slogans including Hong Kong independence, the only way out, and fight to the end. The G20 Infrastructure Working Group met on Wednesday to finalize deliverables on infrastructure technology, or InfraTech, as well as to discuss the draft G20 OECD report on the collaboration with the institutional investors and asset managers, both of which will be presented at the next Finance Ministers and Central Bank Governors meeting in July. The group met to discuss the InfraTech agenda, which provides high-level policy guidance for countries to accelerate the adoption of technology in infrastructure. As the world looks toward the recovery from the COVID-19 pandemic, the working group aims to remove barriers, manage risks, and foster conditions for continuous innovation in infrastructure to enable stable and long-term economic growth. The head of the NATO military alliance said on Wednesday that the West could not ignore the rise of China, so it was important that the UK had a review of the role of Huawei in its 5G network to ensure its security. NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg said China was coming closer to the West in various ways in the Arctic, in cyberspace, and in critical infrastructure, including telecommunications. As part of a broader reassessment of relations with China, Britain's National Cybersecurity Centre is analysing the impact of recent US sanctions on Britain's decision earlier this year to allow Huawei a role in building its 5G network.